playing at the top of your game has a lot of components, one of which is how do you keep going regardless? Because the regardless will happen.
Welcome back. I'm TD Smyers, and this is No Clichés. Hello and welcome to No Clichés, companion podcast to my coaching, consulting, and leadership writing at A Bold Leader. I'm TD Smyers, and I've been in leadership my whole life, from taking point in small teams to command of military troops to multiple roles as a CEO. And if this life in leadership has taught me anything, it's that leading is more art than science. I call this No Clichés because we'll go well beyond the basics here, leaving behind the LinkedIn infographics to dive headfirst into some of the toughest situations a leader can face. Through stories and interviews, you'll get a behind-the-scenes look at leadership truths that always apply, no matter what industry or sector you're in. This is a no-holds-barred leadership conversation, so strap in. Hello and welcome to No Clichés. I am really happy to invite in here Cheryl Lynn Mobley. Cheryl is a career healthcare executive, a prior hospital president, and founder and CEO of Recalibrate, which is an international consultancy dedicated to helping organizations operate at the top of their game. But most recently, Cheryl is an author of Face to Face, a guide to leading more skillfully in times of great disruption and uncertainty. And we're going to talk about that book. So welcome, Cheryl. It's good to have you.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation, TD.
Oh yeah, ever since we talked in about this project, I have been excited about what the outcome would look like, and so it was really awesome to hear from you when you had the prototype and we got to look at it. And this book is unlike any leadership book I've ever seen in content and in format. It's a book that parallels lessons learned and experiences, lessons learned in leadership with experiences on a African horseback safari. And if you know how much bolder can you get than coming face to face with some of the animals, some of the critters that she'll talk about in the book. But not only does she draw these parallels between the two experiences, but she interviews 25 experienced smart leaders, well, 24 experienced smart leaders and me,
TD
about
counts.
about about their experiences. And so real life experiences back up the leadership lessons in the book. So Cheryl, take it away a little bit and tell us what in your background led you to this point. How did you discover you had this book in you, and what made you choose this really interesting and unusual format for the book?
So great questions. And I wish I had like this really awesome answer that just made me sound truly amazing. But what happened for me, the ride was the horseback safari obviously is limited to experienced riders because this is not the time to come off or not understand horses because you're out in the middle basically of the safari. It's like you're inside the zoo, right? You're
Yeah.
inside the gates. And so I was just hoping, to enjoy the trip, come back unscathed, basically in the same shape that I went on the trip in. And the first ride that we had, the very first morning, I'm sitting there and honestly thinking, this is not what I thought I signed up for. And I'm going, ooh, just think of all the parallels here to leadership, team behavior, team cohesiveness, kind of organizational dynamics, outcomes, all of these things. And while I'm sitting there going, oh, what have I done on one part of my mind, the other part of me is just like leaping, thinking about all these parallels and being able to marry those two and bridge those two. Because a horse safari is something very few people will ever experience. Just, I mean, most people don't ever go on safari, period. And then you
Right.
make an even tinier group of people that can go on a horse safari. And so I really wanted to share that experience. And I'm also a photographer. So I wanted to really take images that captured what it felt like. I mean, I want people to feel something when they see the image, like the image on the cover. People are like, did you take that? And I go, yeah. And they go, how close were you to the lion? Right. And I go, using a telephoto lens, I was about 35 feet away, which may sound good, but the lion could have covered that distance in a heartbeat, right? So it's not really distant,
Yeah,
if
those
you're
of you listening in on this and imagining what she's describing, you've got to get the book, if for nothing else, just for that shot of the cover, because it's perfect with the title too, right? Face to
Yeah, it
face.
was just like, wow, it was an amazing gift to be able to experience it. So it really was on that ride. As with my company, Recalibrate, what we work on is really helping leaders and organizations get to be kind of the best in their space, whatever that means for them. It looks different for a hospital than it would for a tech firm, than it would, I mean, so everybody's going to look different. And so I thought my first book, honestly, would be about that.
Hmm.
And I did not expect it to be about a horse safari. So, but literally on the first day, I was like, okay, this is, I guess I'm gonna. And I honestly thought, well, I'll just do some blog posts. I'll take some photos when I can, not from horseback. I didn't take any from horseback, and I'll take some photos when I can, and then I'll do a few blog posts. And then the next day, I'm like, no, 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 this has got to be a book. And if my little pea brain had understood how much work that was going to be, I might have said, no, 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 blogs are good. Blogs are good, right? But I had that thought, so I would literally try really hard because our rides were about 3 to 5 hours in the morning and usually 2 hours in the afternoon
Uh,
every day. And you're not writing anything, you're not taking notes, and my brain is going, "Okay, keep this in mind, keep this in mind." And I would get off the horse and kind of run to, where we were staying and write down as much as I could remember, so that I would keep it really, really fresh because it run you out that much, it starts to run together. As far as the coffee table format, I would love to take credit for that, but I was showing someone else some of my images because I have them on, some of them on my iPad, and he's like, "This has got to be a coffee table book," and I'm like,
yeah.
"Oh, huh, wouldn't have thought of that." But he's like, "These images are amazing," and he says, "You really need to share these." And so then it was like, okay, how do I do that? And it was a matter of going with really really high quality paper, high quality feel, a landscape format, so you can really appreciate the images and feel like you're there. And so that was the reason. That's a long answer to what wasn't a really long question, sorry, but that's how it all came about.
But that's for me as somebody who received the book and read it. I mean, immediately when you unwrap it and you look at it, you're like, okay, the format's obviously different. As you said, it's landscape. It looks like a coffee table book. It's got the incredible image of the lion face to face on the front. And then when you start to read it, you embrace the depth of the content, especially as it's presented in those two parallel storylines, the
Mm,
safari and then the anecdotes from the leaders that you interviewed. So, but it makes it so different than anything else that
mm.
your average bookstore leadership book that you go in and pick up or that you order off Amazon or whatever, and you get it in a standard format like we're all used to, and you sit down and read it. This is something you really feel like you're immersing yourself into the story, and that's what makes it enjoyable as well as edifying and informational. It's really kind of a cool. So I know you self published this book, right? Because you didn't want anybody telling you how to put it together.
That's very true. And I want to back up for a second and just tell you no higher compliment than you just gave the book from what you just said. So, yeah, I did not want to create something that's just like everything else. And that's not to slam what else is out there. There's a lot of
Sure.
great content out there, but that was not my vision. That's not me. And I really wanted to be able to juxtapose people from a straight up story. And here's a funny note because I've written quite a bit. I've not written books before, but I've been published quite a few times in articles over the years. And what I'm known for, and this won't shock you since you know me on this side, is really kind of clarity and brevity. Cut to
Yeah.
the chase. What do we need to know? What do we need to do? And so writing a story of an encounter is a completely, sorry, no pun intended, different animal, right?
Yeah. Right.
It's just a really different approach. And so I had an author that I just thought she was amazing, and I would literally sit down before I was going to work on these, and these sections of each chapter, and I would read some of her stuff and go, what is it that makes this come alive for me, and how can I try and bring that into that piece of it? Then when you get to the leadership principle and the stories from the other leaders, yourself included, that's different. That's kind of more my typical style. And so I know when I'm reading, I want to learn, I want to engage, but your brain can only take so much. And
Mhm.
so to try and go back and forth and take people hopefully in a smooth way, but still a ooh kind of a way from, Here was the experience. You can feel like you were in the saddle with me. And then now let's go look at the principle that I pulled from this encounter. And then let's talk to some leaders who just rocked it. And one of the things that was my great joy was intentionally being able to interview leaders from around the world with very different backgrounds and
Hmm.
working in very different roles in very different organizations.
Yeah, that's one of the first things that struck me about the folks that you chose. I mean, you have you have healthcare professionals, you have entrepreneurs, you have nonprofit executives, you have professional sports people. I mean, just a real wide and broad swath of the economy. You've captured leadership experiences from them that you bring into the book, and they all tie back to things that you experienced on the safari. It's uh, again, how you chose to tell this, it defies a lot of traditional advice on books, right?
Hmm.
I have a friend who's an author, and he said, they tell me to be crystal clear in whether I'm writing a memoir or whether I'm writing a self help book. And
Hmm.
what you've done is you have marvelously fused two types of books, right? And it's engaging, it's entertaining, and it really moves you through it in a way that you feel like you're taking in an experience at the same time you're hearing these incredible stories from leaders all over the economy and all over the world. So, yeah, kudos to you for putting together something that's both entertaining and educational.
Well, awesome. Thank you. That was the hope and the wish for it.
Well, and the execution. So, but
Petty details.
you mentioned that you were inspired on the safari to put this together. It kind of came out of the safari,
Hmm.
but your background is as an executive, your healthcare executive, former president of a hospital. How did the lessons learned that you earned over that career? How did they start to flavor, and how did you start to see this as something complementary to what you were experiencing on the safari?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think there is no one breathing who hasn't, that you lead yourself, hopefully, right? Whether you lead other people or not, first and foremost, you must lead yourself. And so we have all had good experiences where we've led ourselves well or
Yeah,
not
yeah,
so well.
right.
We've all had leaders that were like, I would just go to the wall for this person gladly. And others who were like, oh, what have I done? Right? How fast can I get away? And so we've all had that. So it's a matter of bringing all of your own experience and your own approach, right? And that was the beauty. I certainly didn't go out to, this was not an expose of here's what people did, it was horrible and a gotcha. This is people who were doing this well. Like, how can we learn from people who were doing it well in really different places, who are really different people, so that you can come in and lift that? And even if you don't manage a team right now or lead a team, so many of the questions that people that the leaders shared, so many of the insights, the way they approach things, you can use for yourself.
Hmm.
And so the when on that first encounter, my brain's going, think of all the team dynamics, think of all these things. My brain is flashing to my own experience. On the one where I'm like, we have to move together here. Now, there in that setting, we had a very prescribed way to stand together to be safe. And we had very prescribed things. We had a list of rules of things we had to do and not do to not only keep my own self safe, but to keep everybody else with me safe, the other animals safe, right? I mean, all of these things you had to take into account. Well, that's a leader's job.
Hmm.
It's like, what is it that we're here to do? How do we keep us all moving in the same direction? And usually, with a few exceptions in industry, and healthcare is one of not an exception, is that your life isn't on the line. In healthcare, it is, right?
Mm.
In things where physical safety, your nuclear, your airlines, transportation, construction. I mean, there's a lot of things where safety is first and foremost. But in a lot of businesses, people don't necessarily think about that unless you live in Texas, and it's like, how do you get everybody out in a tornado, right?
Right.
Or an ice storm, don't come to work, whatever it might be. So, but it's a matter of reframing and thinking about, this is my job as the leader. It's to set the context, it's to set the boundaries, and then it's to let everybody free. But it's also that what I do in my choices, and this straight up TD is one of the things I think is really troubling right now, is for an organization. And to your point, it doesn't matter whether it's a not for profit, whether it's a business, whether it's a church, it doesn't matter, right? If you've gathered people together to get something done, you can use these principles because it's all about harnessing our collective energies, wisdom, insight together to create something we couldn't do alone.
Yeah.
But what I'm really seeing falling off the page anymore is caring about other people as much. That it's we've become where we've elevated what's in it for me, and who cares what's going on with everybody else.
Early in the book, you describe a situation that was scary. I mean, there are lots of scary situations in the book, lots of terrifying situations, right? But early on, you have a situation that could have been debilitating, might have been a game changer in some people. And when I read through that, I thought that might be the foundation for a lesson on overcoming your fear and
Hmm.
re-engaging. You took that in a different direction. You took that into a lesson in playing at the top of your game.
Hmm.
Why did you do that, and what was that about?
It's a great question, and I think one of the beautiful things is that everyone who reads the book will probably have different principles that they pull from the story. I mean, I could have pulled 5 or 10 principles from each encounter, so
Mhm.
I was very intentional about which ones I picked to highlight. But fear is something, if you're awake and breathing, you're going to have, even
Yeah.
if you're afraid of something that hasn't happened or might happen or is likely to happen or has happened. And it's like you can let that stop you in your tracks. And so that can be, to me, it has kind of a bit of a negative twist to it. Whereas playing at the top of your game has a lot of components, one of which is, how do you keep going regardless? Because the regardless will happen. You dealt with it in the different settings that you have, been a leader in. Certainly in a hospital setting, you deal with it. There's things you can't control, there's things you can, and you do your best to still shape and direct everybody with those constraints. But to me, nobody really talks much about playing at the top of your game.
Mhm.
And as a leader, if you are not, then the people who want to play at the top of theirs will say hasta la bye bye and leave, because they should.
Yeah.
Because they're going to get kind of crunched and diminished and shrunk down and put in a little teeny box, with with tape on it. And so it's a matter of, to me, it's a very forward looking, what do you do to play at the top of your game, recognizing that there will be things that bump up against that, and it's really, how do you deal with those bumps that will shape how you lead yourself and ultimately how you lead your team, because it comes back to, what do you do inside your own self? And I know that's bad grammar, right? But what do you do inside yourself to manage, because you as a leader are also incredibly visible. And when I first became president, I had to really learn that everything I did was scrutinized.
Mhm.
Everything. And it's like, I used a straw instead of sipping from a cup. I mean, you're just like, seriously?
Yeah.
you just
Yeah. You're in the
you just don't.
fishbowl.
Yeah, and you can say that, but until you've really experienced it, you're
Yeah.
just like, "Oh, okay." And so
Gotcha.
it kind of gives you this other, at least for me, this other little voice running in my head. I'm like, "I know what I mean by this, but how is this appearing?" How could
Got it.
somebody, if they were worried, concerned, whatever, take this and spin it and make it truth?
There's another string that kind of I saw through your book, and again, it resonated with me because a lot of what my practice is built on is this concept that as a top level leader, once in a while, you're going to encounter situations where you're going to have to break some eggs, where you're going to have to upset the apple cart. You're going to have to make a bold move that sometimes means rewriting rules
Mhm.
or defying precedent. Did you have any situations that flavored that string that runs through your book of sometimes having to be bold and step outside the rules to make stuff happen?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all about remembering why you exist. And I don't mean me personally, Cheryl, but as an organization, and then as a leader, my job is to serve the organization and the people that trust us to take care of them, again, in a hospital setting. And so it's like, why are we here? And this is counter to a lot of what I'm seeing talked about today, is that an organization exists to be the care and feeding of its employees first and foremost. And I'm like, no. I
Right.
mean, I would say to our team, I'm like, we exist to take exceptional care of people and their families in one of the scariest times in their lives. That's why we're here. And if they don't need that from us, then we cease to exist. And that trust we need to constantly earn. At the same time, we care deeply about our people and did a ton to pour into them and support them. And they knew they could come to us and go, struggling right now, here's what I need. And we would listen to that. But I think a lot of organizations today and a lot of the talk is backwards,
Yeah, I concur.
and so it's a matter of, yes, you need to take care of your people. Yes, you need to make an environment where they can thrive, flourish, and contribute. But your organization doesn't exist. I mean, we're treating it like kindergarten
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. And so when you remember why you exist, it makes the choices a lot easier. Yeah, it to me, if you're going to do something, do it well. Whatever it is, to me, just kind of coasting or, yeah, we just got the job done. I don't want to be part of that. I never have. And that can make me, I'm sure, frustrating to be around. Be around.
Well,
You know,
or inspirational to be around,
yeah, take your
right?
pick, right? It just
Right?
depends on which side of it you sit on. And so for me, it's always about what is the best way we can do this, because I do want us all to enjoy work. I personally have worked in an organization, not the one where I ended up being president, but where it sucked the life out of me.
Yeah.
I mean, vampire level horrid. And it was a wretched experience, but it was also fabulous because it was like, I don't want to in any way ever make people feel like I was made to feel, right?
Hmm.
I don't ever want to create an environment that was like this. And so it was so hard that it was a great springboard to go, anything that even comes close to that, no, 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 just
Right.
no. And so it's that finding that balance of saying we exist to serve others. How do we at the same time take care of us so we enjoy what we do, because you spend a lot of your upright hours at work.
I often think, one of the letters that gets left out when we talk about letters at work and individualism and stuff, one of the ones is unity, is you
Mhm.
and leaders forging it together. It's funny to hear you recount an experience working that's more than one, right? That sucked the life out of you. And I can't help but reflect back on some of the most poignant leadership stories I have to tell from my experience are fails, or where
Mhm.
where I worked in an environment where a leader tolerated toxic behavior or
Mhm.
even exhibited it his or herself.
Mhm.
So
And you
yeah,
shut down because
yeah,
you
sure,
you can't, and that comes back to the trust issue. If I can't trust you to hold the boundaries, then it's a free for all. And that's what I think we're seeing now. It's like the most disruptive, and not in a good way, and the loudest voice wins. And then everybody else learns that either you have to be, beat your own drum at the exclusion of everybody else to get anything, or they stay and leave kind of a thing, or they literally leave. And so we have moved too far to saying everybody needs to be happy all the time, and that's what defines my success as a leader. And that's such a short-term focus, because even if that is your mantra, you will not succeed really fast. Yeah, because you can't make everybody happy. And because we all are individuals, we all have different things. And if we're not coming together, and I love your word unity, to do something together, and we're not willing to say, Cheryl's not going to get everything Cheryl wants, that's okay. That's okay, because we exist to do something different. And that was one of the things that first hit me on the safari. The very first ride was like, this isn't just about what I want. And my wishes right now are completely and utterly irrelevant.
yeah,
And that's just what happens if you're willing to go forward in an organization and get something done. That's where you have to be. And again, I'm not talking about being abused or being in an unsafe place or anything like that, but it can't all be about what makes Cheryl a happy camper all the time, because there's however many other people and they all want something different to make them happy campers. And I've just seen the loss of the ability of the leaders to define that space and then hold that line. And it's hurting us. And you can see it everywhere in terms of how things are kind of crumbling around the edges. Well, that's why. One of my favorite quotes, kind of like yours with the tyranny of precedent, is what you permit, you promote. And you allow things to happen, and it's tacit approval. Doesn't matter why you're not dealing with it. It's just the way it's perceived. Because you're basically allowing it to go on when you should be the champion of what we do here and what we don't do here. And too often it's become, here's the policy manual, but it's not about how we engage together. right? What we do and what we don't. I mean, when we would have people come into our hospital, I would meet with them after they'd gone through most of their kind of orientation. And I said, "You have been invited into a truly amazing organization." And in my normal, just lovely PC sort of self, I said, "Don't screw it up." Right. you know, because the people here have worked really hard to build something amazing. And we need you to continue to make it amazing. We need you to bring your insights that we don't see. We need you to raise those things and don't wait a year. As you come in brand new, you were seeing things that we may think are amazing. And you're like, well, why do you do it that way? I'm like,
Yeah.
speak up, And so I said, we love having you here. We are thrilled that you were here. I said, at the same time, understand that we have really high standards to stay here because we're very protective of what we built. And so it was, that was just the way it was. And people understood that. It's like, if you don't want to be here, that's fine. But don't stay here and think you're not going to show up the way we expect you to, because we're not going to allow you to destroy what we nurture.
You pointed out a very complimentary aspect of the way I onboarded my folks
Hmm.
in the
And I
book,
loved
right?
what you said. I thought that was fabulous.
Well, thanks. I guess that's why you include in the book, so I appreciate
Yeah.
that. But
Could
but
be.
it does dovetail very nicely with what you just
Hmm.
described. Hey, look, we have a great. You are joining a great team,
Hmm.
and the dual messages of we need you to sustain this greatness and to come on board and be
Hmm.
part of our joint success, and at the same time bring your individual talents. We're better now because we have you. We didn't have you
Hmm.
yesterday,
You said
and
it much nicer than I did, TD. I was
well,
so
but
impressed. I
you
was like, oh, that was way nicer than what I would say.
well, thank you, Cheryl. But what it illustrates though is the fact that you don't have to drop the message of how the individual is important in the workplace. You don't have to trade that for a message of unity. They're the same message. Y-
Agreed.
right, and so many times leaders don't convey the message of unity because they want to err on the side of respecting the individual contribution. They're the
Mm-hmm.
same effort when you're talking about unity, and
Mm-hmm.
you do a great job of weaving that through the two stories basically that you tell, the two messages that you have in the book. One theme that's particularly strong is the issue of trust, and
Mm.
you write about it, you give examples of it. In the safari storyline, you really do a great job of helping people understand how the people on the safari have to trust the safari leader. They have to
Mm-hmm.
trust the steeds, the horses that they're on, and the safari leader sometimes had to trust you all to do the right
Mm-hmm.
thing too, right? To get out of
Absolutely.
so talk about your how deep trust is written in all throughout face to face.
Yeah, great question. It's one of those things, to me, it's as powerful as the unity piece, because candidly, you won't have unity if you don't have trust. Because if I can't trust you to kind of take care of where we're going and to take care of me inside of it, then I'm going to be keeping my eyes out just for my own self. And if that hurts you, well, too bad, so sad. And trust, to me, we miss how we talk about it. And I talk about that in the book in terms of broadening how I think we should be approaching trust and what it means and where it needs to live. It's easy to lose, it's hard to regain, but having trust is so vital. And when I think about it, I had leaders that I trusted. I didn't always like what they did or how they did it, but I trusted them to have the well-being of the organization. I'll give you an example. One of the I reported to the COO of a very large organization, and he said to me, "Well, you understand, if y'all don't continue to do a good job, we'll shut you down." And I'm like, "I get that. I understand that. That's fine, because we will continue to do a good job. So no worries." So, but it's a lot of people would be offended by that and would feel like they needed to just, this person hated them or whatever. And I'm like, no, that person trusted me enough to have it a very pragmatic kind of business conversation. And I trusted them enough at other times to say, you say this is the environment you want, but here's, when you do X, here's the impression it creates. And so if that's what you want, awesome. If it's not, just a heads up. And so it's got to be, it's earned continually. The beautiful thing, TD, I don't know about you, but I make absolutely no claim whatsoever to anything approaching perfection. I am certainly not flawless, and I have never said I'm flawless. And any 360 you get will prove right straight up you are not flawless.
Right.
But to me, that's encouraging because I'm not flawless. No one on my team was flawless, but we still year over year did something beyond amazing. And so that's hopeful, right?
Sure.
That it's not just for the few perfect humans or those who have the delusion that they are that can get to this level, because it's being willing to say, I didn't handle that well.
Yeah.
Because and that really kind of comes back to the playing at the top of your game. Sometimes you just have to go, this didn't go the way I planned, and here's kind of what's going on. Here's what I'm thinking. What do y'all think? How can we, right? So we have this illusion of acting like we're perfect all the time is the way to go.
And I've discovered in my experience, because I resemble that remark,
Yeah.
about being imperfect. But when I was and when I was a young officer coming up, that was difficult for me to accept because I saw people around me who appeared to be so perfect.
Hmm.
But once I accepted the fact that I wasn't, and by the way, they weren't either, it opened up a whole new world for me, right? A world of being able to innovate by accepting the
Hmm.
fact that we're going to risk and sometimes we're going to lose, and we're going to pick ourselves, dust us off, and learn from that, and we're going to go forward together. I found that really resonated with people who were entrusted to my leadership by the organization. That they felt like we were failing together, or we sometimes we'd actually succeed together and achieve great
Hmm.
things, and but that entering into that truthfulness with humility was a big piece of that.
And it flows over. I mean, in just in line with what you just said, I would talk to our folks about we're experimenting constantly. There are things we cannot experiment with. We can never ever experiment with the safety of our patients and their families, our staff, all of them. We can't do that. We obviously have regulations we will follow to the letter every single time. But outside of that, let's be curious and let's go, how could we do this? And if we approach it with an attitude that this is an experiment, it doesn't have that same failure stigma.
Hmm.
We all know some of these are going to work and they're not. And I would say to people, I'm like, we learned something. Now let's take what we learned and let's try again. Let's iterate a little bit differently. It's okay. This was not a fail. A fail would have been doing nothing or doing it the way we've always done it.
That's
So,
this is probably a good point to talk a little bit more about one of the coolest aspects that I think you've built into this project. And I'm going to call it a project because,
yeah, yeah,
to
it's a good
right?
word.
Well, yeah, I know it feels like that to you, but to just call it a book ignores some of the other resources that come with engaging in face to face, right? Because it is the gift that keeps on giving.
Oh,
Can you talk a little bit about going deeper and what you've built in so that people can continue the experience beyond reading the pages of the book?
yeah. This was not originally necessarily the plan. I wanted to offer something extra just because to me, someone taking their time and resources to purchase a book, whether it's an ebook or a coffee table book, it's their time, it's their money. And I wanted them to be like, wow, I am so glad I did this. And I'm like, how can I amplify the book? We
Yeah.
do, we do videos for each chapter. And to your point, each chapter is divided into two parts. The first is the story, and then the second part is the principal and the leaders I interviewed, including yourself, who shows up in the first chapter, to showcase how they bring that to life. So people, I call it buying speed, right? So people can go, ooh, I like that. Next time I bring somebody on, I'm going to say what TD said, in my
Yeah.
own way, but I'm going to take that. I'm going to lift that, which is the whole purpose. It's like to give people things they can take and play with right away. But on top of that, I wanted to offer more. So the videos are more on the story that wasn't in the book. There's one, I think in the very first chapter, there's a teeny bit of overlap, but I think the rest of the time there is no overlap between what's in the book and what I share in the video. So the first part is, we call it behind the scenes, which goes into the safari side of what it's like to literally be inside fencing, right? I mean, where we slept, there was canvas walls between us and everything. you know, there was a few stairs, and there's a lot of the most dangerous animals who could have climbed those stairs if they so choose, and the canvas is no barrier to them. So
Mhm.
that's where we slept. And then when we're out riding, we're literally in the zoo. So if you think about being in a lion's cage or in with the rhinos or the hippos, that's exactly our experience. Period. So the behind the scenes gives more on that. And then there's a second video for each chapter that goes into, we call that leadership sightings, which is more in depth kind of on that principle. And again, it's very much here's what this can look like, here's what you can do with this. And so that's in there as well, accessible for either the ebook or the coffee table book as a way to go deeper. And I've heard really wonderful feedback from people who have looked at them and said, "Ooh, can I share this with somebody? This is really good. My husband really needs to hear this."
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, awesome, right? So that's what that is.
It's the best kind of bonus content I've ever seen because it is, as you say, additive. It's new material, stuff that backs up what you've written about before, but it continues the journey instead of repeating the journey. And it's
Mm.
really a cool concept. It was a lot of work, I know, but well worth it. And again, just another reason to lay into face to face for the stories in the book and the lessons that continue in going deeper. And so, in terms of getting your hands on a copy of Face to Face, you can do it effective today. So, Cheryl, the book is on sale right now. Tell folks how to get a hold of a copy.
So there are two ways, depending on the format that you want. The ebook will be available through Amazon, and as I said, the ebook will still have access to the additional video content. Or if you prefer the coffee table book experience, being able to kind of touch it, hold it, look at it, that is available exclusively through my website. I am happy to autograph it for anyone who asks. It will come in a way that will surprise you and hopefully really excite you because everyone who's received the book this way has been like, wow. And with an extra little bonus in there for you as well. And so that is available through my website, recalibrate.today. And so it just depends on which format you want to go with. So the ebook is Amazon, and the recalibrate.today will take you to the kind of the coffee table experience.
Well, I'm personally glad that I have the coffee table experience in front of me because there's just so much to it, and the fact that it does sit on the coffee table. I mean, this is a conversation starter. If you got
Hmm.
somebody coming over that's just looking through the pictures, you get to launch into a dialogue about a number of things that we've
Mm.
discussed a little bit on this program about trust, about resilience, just really cool stuff. Get yourself a copy of Face to Face by Cheryl Lynn Mobley. Face to Face is a guide to leading more skillfully in times of great disruption and uncertainty. And can't think of a more timely subtitle for a book
Yeah.
about leadership coming out now. So, Cheryl, thank you for the book. And I want to thank you for asking me to be a part of it because what that did was expose me to the book and give me the opportunity to learn from 24 other amazing people,
Mm.
25 counting the author, that in terms of raising my own level of performance and sharpening my own game and trying to achieve 99 percentile in what I do as an executive coach. So I appreciate your time today. I appreciate your artistry in this book, and I can't wait to share it with everybody. So thank you, Cheryl.
I am thrilled to have been here on TD. I am just beyond jazzed that you really enjoyed it and continue to enjoy it. So thank you so much for inviting me to share with your community.
Thanks for listening in to this episode of No Clichés. For visual stuff like links, text, and pics, visit aboldleader.com and look for the banner at the top of the page. I'd also like to know what you think. You can leave a voice message at anchor.fm/aboldleader or a written one at aboldleader.com. I'm TD Smyers, and I look forward to having you back.